Today, we're diving into a source that makes a really bold claim. Our modern economy has made traditional relationships, well, financially unworkable. But it doesn't stop there. It proposes a pretty radical solution, and it's all about the economics of polygyny. But before we get into all that, let's start with a question that, probably hits close to home for a lot of people. In today's world, can a family really get by on just one income? The source we're digging into today starts with this simple but powerful observation. And honestly, this one idea is the key to understanding the much bigger and way more controversial argument that's coming. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we'll look at the economic pressures on modern marriage. Then we'll get into a specific model of polygyny that the source calls unfeasible. After that, we'll explore why the old ways are failing, compare two very different approaches, and finally, we'll unpack this radical alternative called the Ubuntu model. Let's get into it. All right, let's kick things off with the foundation of this whole argument, what the source calls the modern marriage squeeze. Here's the core idea. For most of us, the dream of one person supporting an entire family is just that, a dream. The source basically argues that our economy is now designed for two-income households, and that fact is putting a massive amount of pressure on how we even think about family. Okay, so now let's see how this financial pressure connects directly to the main topic, a model of polygyny that the source says just doesn't work anymore. The source has a name for this, the traditional provider model. It's a pretty straightforward idea, right? One man is the sole provider for all of his wives and all of their children. No other income, just him. And here's the bottom line from the source. If one income can barely support one family these days, how on earth can it possibly support several? It argues that for pretty much everyone, it's an economic impossibility. This model, it says, is just completely out of sync with the world we're all living in. But the argument isn't just about the money. The source claims that the old way fails because, well, the world itself has fundamentally changed. Just think about what it took to run a household in the past. We're talking about serious, back-breaking work, grinding your own wheat, sewing all the clothes, farming the land. It was a full-time, labor-intensive job. Today, yeah, most of that's been replaced by a quick trip to the supermarket. And what changed everything? Technology. I mean, inventions like the washing machine, the dishwasher, even the modern grocery store, they have completely transformed what it means to run a home. The sheer amount of physical labor required has been drastically reduced. So what happens when you take that old model and just plop it down into our modern world? According to the source, it just breaks. It argues that a stay-at-home partner becomes underutilized, and it uses some very strong language here, and just to be clear, these are its words, not mine, to make this point. This brings us right to the heart of the argument. Section 4, a tale of two models. This is where the source really lays it all out, pitting what it sees as a dysfunctional model against its proposed functional one. All right, so what are these two different paths? On one side, you have what the source literally calls the nightmare model. In this version, the husband is a glorified slave, the wives are lazy and complacent, and the whole thing is just an economic drain. But on the other side, you have the functional model. Here, everyone is a partner, everyone contributes, and the family actually builds wealth together. It's a pretty stark contrast. Let's dig a little deeper into that nightmare model. The source paints a really bleak picture, describing a home just filled with conflict and resentment, where non-contributing partners, in its words, are just bitchy and moaning, fighting over money and attention. And then, wow. The source makes its most extreme claim. It says that this model doesn't just lead to an unhappy family. No, it leads to, and I'm quoting here, the fall of mankind. It's a shocking statement for sure, and a really powerful indictment of that traditional approach. Okay, so after all of that doom and gloom, what's the solution? This is where the source introduces what it calls the Ubuntu alternative. The source calls this Ubuntu-style polygyny. Now, Ubuntu is a philosophy that's all about our shared humanity and interdependence, and that's exactly what this model is about, a cooperative, team-based approach where everyone works together as one big economic unit. So how does this Ubuntu model actually work in practice? Well, the source breaks it down into 4 steps. Step 1, everybody works, no exceptions. Step 2, you divide and conquer. Some partners bring in the income, others manage the home and kids, but all of it is considered essential work. Step 3, you build wealth together, as a team. And finally, step 4, you protect your shared investments. It's almost like a business-like approach to running a family. And what about the role of women in this setup? The source argues that by actively contributing, they become these powerful anchors in the relationship. They're not just dependents, they're foundational pillars of the family's success. So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway? The source is making a really powerful economic argument. It's saying that in our modern world, passive dependency is just a recipe for failure. The only way to succeed, it claims, is through mutual, proactive contribution from every single partner. And that brings us to the final question, really. Whether you're in a monogamous relationship, a polygynous one, it doesn't matter. The source kind of forces us all to ask, in a world that has changed so much, what does a truly fair contribution from every partner actually look like? That's something for all of us to think about.